The receipt was small. White paper, folded twice, tucked into the inner pocket of a coat she was hanging up so she could drop it at the dry cleaner on Thursday. She almost did not look at it. She almost put it in the trash with the other things she found in his pockets: parking stubs, a pen cap, a folded napkin. But something made her unfold it. Serenity Cove Resort and Spa. Check-in Friday, 2 adults, total $412. Nicole stood in the hallway of the house she had helped pay for in the city where she had built her life and read the receipt twice. Then she read it again. Her hands did not shake. That surprised her later when she thought about it. She expected her hands to shake. She had told Patrick about Serenity Cove 2 years ago. She had seen it in a travel magazine and shown him the pictures: the white balconies, the pool that stretched out toward the water, the breakfast served on private terraces. She had said, "One day, let's go there." He had looked at the pictures and said it looked expensive. He had said it the way he said a lot of things: not no, but not yes either. Somewhere in the middle where things just never happened. Now he was there, and she was standing in the hallway. Patrick had left that morning for what he called a work trip. He had a big pitch, he said. A client out of state who needed in-person meetings all week. He had packed his good shirts, the ones he wore when he wanted to impress someone. She had ironed one of them the night before because his hand was bothering him and he asked her to. She had done it without thinking. She had kissed him at the door. He had already been checking his phone when he kissed her back. Nicole folded the receipt and held it in her hand for a long time. The house was very quiet. They did not have children yet. They had talked about it, or she had talked about it, and he had nodded in a way that never quite turned into a real conversation. The house felt big on regular days. Today it felt enormous. She walked to the kitchen and poured herself a cup of coffee from the pot she had made that morning, before the school run that was not her run, before the life she was not living. She sat at the kitchen table. She thought about Tara. Tara worked in Patrick's office. Nicole had met her at the company Christmas party 8 months ago. Tara was the kind of woman who laughed loudly and touched arms when she talked to people. She had touched Patrick's arm twice during the dinner portion of the evening. Nicole had noticed. She had told herself she was being too sensitive. Tara was just that kind of person. Patrick had said the same thing when Nicole mentioned it in the car on the way home. "You're reading too much into it," he said. "She's just like that with everyone." Nicole had nodded. She had let it go. She had let a lot of things go. The coffee was going cold in her hands. She looked at it. She looked at the receipt on the table beside her cup. She looked at the window and the ordinary street outside: a neighbor walking a dog, a delivery driver pulling up to someone's door, the regular world going on as regular worlds do. She had two choices right now. She could cry. She could fall apart, call Patrick, scream at him through the phone, throw something in this kitchen that she had cleaned and organized and cared for. She could do all of that. Or she could think. Nicole set the coffee cup down. She picked up the receipt. She took a photo of it with her phone. Then she went to find the rest of the truth, because she already knew in her stomach that there was more of it, and that finding it was the only thing that was going to help her now. She had been a woman who waited. She had waited for Patrick to be ready to have children. She had waited for him to be promoted before she pushed for her own career goals. She had waited and adjusted and made room and moved herself to the edges of her own life so his life could expand. She had been patient and good, and she had received a folded receipt from a resort she had once called her dream. Nicole poured the cold coffee into the sink. She made a fresh cup. She sat back down. She was 34 years old. She was not going to waste another day. She did not cry that morning. She did not cry for a long time after that, and when she finally did, it was not because she was broken. It was because she was finally letting go of something she should have put down years ago. But that came later. Right now she sat at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee, a phone with one photograph on it, and the beginning of a plan she did not yet know the shape of. Outside, the delivery driver drove away. The neighbor and the dog turned the corner. The street went quiet. The house was still enormous, but Nicole did not feel small in it anymore. She felt clear. There is a thing that happens when you love someone. You build a story about them, about who they are, about what they are capable of, about what they would and would not do. And when evidence starts arriving that does not fit the story, you do not always throw out the story. Sometimes you adjust the evidence. You find a way to make it fit. You explain it away, smooth it over, tuck it into a corner where it does not bother you too much. Nicole had been doing that for 18 months. She knew it now. Sitting at the kitchen table with her coffee and her photograph of a hotel receipt, she let herself go back through all the moments she had explained away, and she looked at them without the story this time, without the version of Patrick she had built in her head, just the moments as they actually were. The new cologne was the first thing. About a year and a half ago, Patrick had started wearing a different scent. She had commented on it once. She said it was nice, asked where it came from. He said a friend at work had recommended it. She had smiled and thought nothing more about it. But she remembered now that when she asked which friend, he had changed the subject so smoothly she had not even noticed the change until later that day. By then, she had moved on to other things. Then there were the phone calls. Patrick had always been someone who took work calls in whatever room he happened to be in. He was not private about it, but around the same time the new cologne appeared, he started stepping out. Not dramatically, not grabbing his phone and rushing from the room, just quietly standing up, walking to the backyard or the hallway, coming back a few minutes later. It happened often enough that she noticed. She told herself he was dealing with a difficult client. She told herself some work conversations were sensitive. She believed her own explanations, because believing them was easier than asking questions she did not want answered. The laugh was harder to explain away, but she had managed it. One evening she had walked into the kitchen while Patrick was leaning against the counter, phone to his ear, laughing at something, this light, bright, almost shy laugh she had never heard from him before. He saw her and the laugh stopped. He finished the call quickly. She asked who it was. He said a colleague. She stood there for a moment feeling like she had walked in on something, but there was nothing to point at, nothing concrete, so she let it pass. She made dinner. They ate and talked about other things. She filed the laugh in the same corner where she had filed everything else. The Christmas party. That was the moment she came closest to seeing clearly. Tara, 31 years old, with natural hair and an easy smile and a laugh that carried across a room. Nicole had watched her move through the party and had watched the way Patrick's posture changed when Tara came near, something loosening in his shoulders, something lighting up in his face. She had thought, that is the way a person looks at someone they admire. She had not let herself think the next thought. She had gotten another glass of wine and talked to the wife of Patrick's manager about something she could not now remember. In the car on the way home she had said carefully that Tara seemed very comfortable around Patrick. He had said they worked closely together. She had said that she noticed Tara touched his arm. He had said Tara was like that with everyone. She had looked out the window and felt something cold move through her, and then she had chosen, actively chosen, to put it down, because they had a house together, because they had plans together, because she had given years to this marriage, and she was not ready to look at those years and ask what they had actually been. That was the cost of the story she had built. It did not come free. Every time she chose not to look, she gave something up, some small piece of herself that knew better. Now she thought about all the times Tara's name had appeared, casually, in the way a name appears when someone is thinking about a person often. Patrick mentioning that Tara had recommended a restaurant. Patrick saying Tara had stayed late to help finish a presentation. Patrick bringing up Tara's opinion on something in a way that showed he knew her opinions well. None of it was proof of anything on its own, but all of it together now looked like exactly what it was. Nicole got up from the kitchen table and walked to the window. She thought about the times Patrick had been distracted, the evenings when he sat across from her at dinner and she could tell his mind was somewhere else. She had assumed it was work stress. She had given him space. She had been patient. She had thought patience was what love looked like sometimes. She thought about her own career. She was an interior designer, a good one. Before she married Patrick, she had been building something real. A growing list of clients, a name people were starting to recognize, a direction that felt like it was leading somewhere. After the wedding, Patrick had been promoted to a regional director role, which meant more travel, more demand, more of him being needed elsewhere. Someone had to hold the home together. Someone had to be the steady one. She had stepped back from the bigger projects, taken on smaller local work, made herself the one who was always available when he needed her. She had done it willingly. She had not been forced, but she had done it for a man who was spending his work trips at a resort she had told him was her dream. Nicole pressed her hand flat against the window glass. It was cold. She stayed there for a moment, feeling the cold of the glass, and she did something she had not let herself do in a long time. She stopped adjusting the evidence. She let the picture be what it was. She felt the full weight of it, the loss and the anger and the deep, quiet grief of realizing that the story she had told herself had not been the truth for a very long time. Then she took a breath and pushed off from the window. She had 4 days before Patrick came home. That was enough time. Patrick's home office was the room at the end of the hall. It had a door that was almost always slightly open, the kind of open that looked casual but was calculated, not closed enough to seem secretive, not open enough for her to see the screen from the hallway. She had walked past that door hundreds of times. She had knocked and brought him coffee. She had stood at the doorway and asked what he wanted for dinner. She had never had a reason to go through it. She had a reason now. She did not rush. She made herself eat breakfast first. She made eggs and toast and sat at the table and ate slowly, because she knew that what was in that office was going to demand a clear head. She was not going in there angry. She was going in there with purpose. The office was neat. Patrick was an organized person. It was something she had respected about him when they first met. Files in order, pens in a cup, nothing on the desk that did not need to be there. She started with the filing cabinet on the left side of the desk. It had a small lock, but the key was on a ring in the top right desk drawer, where it had always been. He had never felt the need to hide the key because he had never thought she would look. The first file was regular insurance documents, car records, his professional certifications. She moved through them steadily. Then she found a folder at the back of the second drawer, behind a hanging file labeled Tax Returns. It was not labeled. She pulled it out and opened it. Inside was a stack of papers, bank statements, but not from their joint account, from an account she did not know existed. It was in Patrick's name only. The statements went back 14 months. Nicole sat down in Patrick's chair and read them. The amounts going in were steady, regular transfers from their joint account, usually around the first of the month, listed as savings transfer. She had seen those transactions before and assumed they were going to the joint savings account they kept for emergencies. She had never thought to check. She had trusted him. The amounts going out of this private account told a different story. There were payments to a company she did not recognize, Clarity Venture Co., starting 8 months ago, growing larger each month. She set those papers aside and went back to the filing cabinet. In the bottom drawer, behind folders for old utility bills, she found a manila envelope. Inside was a document she had to read 3 times before she fully understood what she was holding. It was a draft contract. Patrick's name was on it, and so was the address of a property, their property, the small investment property they had bought together 3 years ago, a 2-bedroom unit they rented out. The contract appeared to be a collateral agreement. The property was being put up as security against a loan. The loan was going to Clarity Venture Co. Nicole put the document flat on the desk and looked at it. Clarity Venture Co. She took out her phone and searched the name. It took less than a minute to find it. A small startup registered 8 months ago. Listed co-founder, Tara. She sat very still. She went back through the papers. She found emails printed and filed, which meant Patrick had printed them himself, which meant he knew they were important. The emails were between Patrick and someone identified only by a company email address, discussing how to structure the loan so it would not require Nicole's signature. There was a note in Patrick's handwriting on one of the printed pages: check with Legal Ray, joint property rules in state. He was not just having an affair. He had been building a plan that used the things they had built together to build a new life with someone else. He was going to take what was half hers and hand it to Tara, while Nicole was here ironing his shirts and making room in her life and waiting for him to be ready for children. Nicole photographed every single document. She was methodical about it. Every page, every email, every bank statement. She made sure the images were clear. She put everything back exactly as she found it, the papers in order, the envelope in the bottom drawer, the folder behind the utility bills, the filing cabinet locked, the key back in the desk drawer. She closed the office door to its usual angle, almost open, just not quite. Then she went to the bathroom and turned on the shower and stood in the steam for a long time, not crying, just standing, letting the heat work on the cold that had gotten into her chest. She had known this morning that there was more truth to find. She had been right, and now that she had found it, she was not surprised, and that was perhaps the saddest part of it. When the truth is bad enough, it stops being shocking. It just becomes the shape of things. She had also known, somewhere deep down, that Patrick was the kind of man who planned. He did not do things carelessly. The affair had not been careless. He had been managing it for over a year without her catching on. And now she could see that the affair was not just emotional or physical. It had an architecture. It had documents and accounts and a company name. He had been building toward something while she was standing still, waiting for the life they had planned. She turned off the shower. She dried off. She put on clean clothes and she looked at herself in the bathroom mirror for a long moment. She was 34 years old. She had a sharp mind and a real skill and a career she had set aside and a full file of photographs on her phone that were going to matter enormously very soon. She looked at herself and made herself a promise. Not the kind of promise you make in anger, where you say you will ruin someone and mean it in that hot, blinding way. This was a quieter promise, the kind you make when the anger has already burned down to something cleaner and more durable. She promised herself that she was going to get everything she was entitled to, every single thing. And then she was going to build something so good with it that looking back would feel like looking at someone else's life. She went to find her phone. She had a call to make. Bria picked up on the second ring. She always did. That was the thing about Bria. She was the kind of friend who did not let calls go to voicemail when she recognized the number, even when she was busy, even when it was inconvenient. They had been friends since their sophomore year in college, when they were both studying design and arguing over workspace in a shared studio. Bria had switched to law 2 years later, but they had never lost the thread. Nicole told her everything. She did not dramatize it and she did not minimize it. She sat on the edge of her bed and went through it in order: the receipt, the hotel name, the Christmas party, the office, the private account, the property contract, Clarity Venture Co. She heard Bria go completely quiet in a way that was different from listening quiet. It was the quiet of someone who was already thinking. When she finished, Bria said, "Okay, don't touch anything else in that office. Don't move money. Don't change account access. Don't confront him. Can you do that?" Nicole said yes. "Good. There is someone I want you to meet. His name is Mr. Okafor. He does not lose. I mean that literally. I have watched him work for 2 years and I cannot think of a case he has not come out of well. He is expensive, but the situation you just described to me means you have grounds for a financial recovery that could cover his fee and then some. Call him this afternoon. Tell him I sent you." Nicole wrote down the number. "Are you okay?" Bria asked, and her voice shifted, not lawyer friend now, just friend. Nicole thought about the question honestly. "I'm clear," she said. "I think I'm going to be okay. Right now I'm just clear." "Clear is good," Bria said. "Clear is the best thing you can be right now." They stayed on the phone a few more minutes. Then Nicole called Mr. Akaffer's office. He could see her the following morning at 9. She arrived at 8:55. His office was on the 12th floor of a building downtown, clean and simple, good furniture, not showy. The kind of space that said competence rather than performance. Mr. Akaffer himself was a tall man in his 50s, with reading glasses on a cord around his neck, and a way of being completely still when he listened that made Nicole feel like every word she said was being received and filed precisely. She put her phone on the table between them and walked him through the photographs, every bank statement, every page of the draft contract, every email. He looked at each image carefully. He asked questions, specific ones, about timing, about names on accounts, about whether she had ever signed anything related to Clarity Venture Co. She answered all of them. When she finished, he folded his hands on the table and looked at her. "Here is where you stand," he said. "The private account and the fund transfers create a strong case for financial misconduct within the marriage. The collateral agreement is particularly problematic because the investment property is joint property. He cannot legally pledge it as collateral without your consent. If that agreement was executed, it may be voidable. If it was not yet executed, we move now to make sure it does not get executed." Nicole asked how soon they could file. He said they could be ready within 2 to 3 weeks, but she should not rush the timeline at the expense of preparation. He wanted her to gather a few more things, specifically full statements from every joint account, documentation of the investment property, and any evidence she could find of direct communications between Patrick and Tara that showed the relationship was ongoing. She had some of that already. She would gather the rest. "I want you to understand something," Mr. Akaffer said. "This is not just a divorce case. There is financial fraud embedded in this marriage. That changes the shape of the settlement significantly in your favor. It also means Patrick is going to fight this, because he has more to lose than just the marriage." Nicole nodded. "I know. You need to be prepared for it to be unpleasant." "I'm prepared," she said. He studied her for a moment. "Most people who come in here at this stage are not this composed. I want you to know that composure is useful, but if there are moments when it cracks, that is also fine. It does not affect the case." Nicole appreciated the acknowledgement. She kept her voice steady. "I just need to know I'm protected. The rest I can handle." He told her the retainer amount. She transferred it from a personal savings account she had maintained separately, a habit from before she was married, a small account she had kept in her own name, the kind of thing you do almost automatically when you are a woman who grew up watching her mother start over. She had never touched it. She had always thought of it as unnecessary. Now she was grateful for it in a way she could not quite put into words. After the meeting, she sat in her car in the parking garage for 10 minutes. This was real now. She had been holding it in the private space of her own mind for 2 days, the hotel receipt, the documents, the photographs. Now it existed outside of her. It was in a lawyer's hands. It was moving. There was a shape to it and a direction and a person who knew what to do with it. She thought about Patrick at the resort right now, having breakfast on one of those private terraces she had once pointed at in a magazine, sitting across from Tara in the morning light, not thinking about Nicole at all or thinking about her only in terms of logistics, what she knew, what she did not know, how long he had before he had to manage her. He did not know that she already knew everything. He did not know that she was sitting in a parking garage with a lawyer's card in her hand and a plan moving forward. He thought she was home, waiting. Nicole started the car. She drove home and she made a list of every document she still needed to collect, and she worked through the afternoon with the focused calm of a woman who has made a decision she will not be talked out of. The grief was there. The loss was real. 8 years of her life were in this marriage, but the grief was something she could carry while she worked. She had learned a long time ago that feeling something and functioning did not have to be opposites. She collected everything Mr. Akaffer needed. She put it all in a folder. She labeled it neatly. She kept it in the bottom of her personal bag. Then she waited for Patrick to come home. He brought her flowers. That was the thing she would remember, that he stood in the doorway with a small bouquet of flowers, orange and yellow, wrapped in that paper from a gas station or an airport shop. The kind of flowers you buy when you need to bring something, when you need the gesture more than the flowers themselves. He smiled when he came in. He kissed her on the cheek. He said the trip was exhausting and the client was difficult and he was glad to be home. She took the flowers. She put them in a glass of water. She said they were pretty. Nicole had spent the 3 days before his return thinking about how to be in this room with him. She had decided on something she called performance of normal, not performance in a dishonest way. She was not going to pretend she was fine with what she knew. She was going to be the version of herself she had been before she found the receipt. Quiet, present, doing the things that kept the house moving. She was not going to be warm in a way that felt false. But she was not going to be cold in a way that tipped him off. She had 4 more things she needed to find before Mr. Okafor had everything. She needed Patrick to be comfortable. She needed him to be the version of himself that was careless at home because he thought home was safe. He ate the dinner she had made. He talked about the client, the meetings, the travel. He complained about the hotel room being noisy, and she watched his face while he said it, and there was a flicker of something, some micro-movement of the eyes that she recognized as practiced. He had rehearsed the hotel complaint. He had thought about what to say about where he had been sleeping. She asked him questions about the client. She listened. She passed him the bread. After dinner, he sat on the sofa and watched television and fell asleep, which was what he usually did when he was tired. She cleaned up the kitchen. She folded laundry. She did everything the way she always did it, with the muscle memory of years of this life. Around midnight, he went to bed. She watched him fall asleep easily, the way people sleep when they are not carrying guilt hard enough to keep them awake. That told her something too. When his breathing settled and deepened, she got up. She went to her bag. She pulled out the phone. She already had most of what she needed, but there was one more thing, a login for a financial account she had seen referenced in the emails. She had been waiting for him to be home and logged in so she could check whether the collateral agreement had been executed yet. She sat at the kitchen table with her phone. She could hear him sleeping from down the hall. The house was quiet in that late-night way that feels different from daytime quiet, heavier, more honest. She found what she was looking for. The collateral agreement had been drafted and formatted but not yet executed. It needed both a notary and her forged signature or a legal workaround that Patrick had apparently not yet managed. She photographed the screen. She sent everything to Mr. Okafor's secure email. She added a note at the bottom. I believe we need to move as soon as possible. Mr. Okafor responded at 7 a.m. the next morning. Agreed. I will have the filing ready within 10 days. 10 days? Nicole got through those 10 days the way she had gotten through the days since she found the receipt, by focusing on what was directly in front of her. Patrick was home and he was, in the way of a man who believed he had not been caught, relatively normal. He brought coffee to her in the morning. He asked about her day. He was not a terrible person to share a space with on the surface, which was its own particular kind of sad. The surface was so livable, and what was underneath it had been rotting for over a year. She noticed things she had not let herself notice before. The way he held his phone face down on the table. The way he stepped outside to take calls. The way he looked at his phone before he looked at her in the morning. Small things. She noted them and said nothing and moved through her days. She started reaching out to old clients. She told them she was coming back to design work full-time. 3 of them responded within a day. 2 of them had projects. She made notes, sent follow-up emails, felt the part of herself that had been dormant start to wake up. On the 9th day, she packed a bag. Not everything, she did not want to signal anything. Just her important documents, her personal savings account information, her laptop, her portfolio drive, the things she would need. She left the bag in the trunk of her car. On the 10th day, Mr. Akafer's office called to confirm the filing would go through the following morning. That night, Nicole cooked dinner. She set the table. She sat across from Patrick and they ate, and she looked at him, really looked at him, maybe for the last time, and she thought about the man she had believed he was. The man she had built the story around. She let herself feel that loss, quietly, privately, in a place he could not see. Then she cleared the dishes. She washed them. She dried her hands. She went to bed. She lay on her side with her eyes open, and she thought about what was coming, and she was not afraid. She was ready. The grief was there, but it was manageable. She had been grieving this marriage for 18 months without knowing that is what she was doing. She was almost through the hardest part. When she finally closed her eyes, she slept better than she had in a year. By the time Patrick walked into his office the following morning, the papers were waiting for him. Patrick's colleague Nadia was the one who told Bria, who told Nicole, what happened when the papers were served. Patrick had been at his desk in the middle of a regular Wednesday morning when a process server walked into the office building and asked for him by name at the reception desk. He came down thinking it was a courier with documents for a client. He signed for the envelope without reading the label. He opened it in the elevator on the way back up. By the time the elevator doors opened, he was standing completely still. He went back to his office and closed the door. He stayed in there for 20 minutes. When he came out, Nadia said, his face had a look she had never seen on him before. Not anger yet, something before anger. The look of a person who has just understood that the floor they were standing on is not where they thought it was. He called Nicole at 11:14 a.m. She was sitting in a coffee shop 2 blocks from Mr. Akafer's office, working on a design concept for a client she had reconnected with the week before. Her phone lit up with his name and she looked at it for a moment, then let it ring through. He called again. She let that one ring through too. She texted Mr. Akafer's office. He called. I didn't answer. They responded within minutes. Perfect. Do not answer or respond to direct communication. All contact goes through us now. She put her phone face down and went back to her design work. Patrick called twice more that day. He texted, Nicole, we need to talk. She did not respond. That evening he came home to find her bag gone from the closet. She had gone back during the day, while he was at work, to collect the rest of what she needed and leave the key on the kitchen counter. She was not going to stay in that house. Mr. Akafer had secured a court order protecting the joint assets, which meant Patrick could not do anything with the property or the accounts while the proceedings were active. The house was safe. Her things were what mattered. She was staying with Bria. Bria's apartment was small and full of books and had a guest room with a good mattress and a window that looked out over a courtyard where pigeons argued every morning. Nicole woke up that first morning in the guest room and heard the pigeons and felt something loosen in her chest. She lay there and let it loosen. It felt like the first real breath she had taken in a long time. Patrick's attorney contacted Mr. Akafer's office 2 days after the filing. The tone of the communication, Mr. Akafer told Nicole, was aggressive, a strategy she should expect, designed to make her feel that she was the unreasonable party, that she had acted recklessly, that they had a strong case. Mr. Akafer told her to expect this and to pay it no emotional attention whatsoever. They are not talking to you, he explained at their next meeting. They are talking to a strategy. The aggression is a signal that they are worried, not that they are strong. The financial misconduct gave Nicole's case a different shape than a typical divorce. Patrick had used marital funds to establish and support a private account and had directed those funds toward a third party's business venture. That was actionable. The attempted use of joint property as collateral without her consent added another layer. Mr. Akafer moved through it with the calm certainty of someone who had done this many times and knew exactly where each step led. Nicole attended every meeting. She asked questions. She read every document before she signed anything. She was not the kind of client who handed everything to her lawyer and looked away. She wanted to understand every part of what was happening to her life and to her assets because they were her life and her assets, and she had not spent years building them to hand them off blindly to anyone. There were moments that were hard. There was a day when she sat in Mr. Acker's office looking at a financial statement that showed the exact amounts Patrick had transferred over 14 months, and the number was larger than she had initially understood. Seeing it clearly, all at once, was different from knowing it in a general way. She sat with that for a moment. Then she asked Mr. Acker what that number meant for the settlement. He told her it meant she had a strong claim for damages above and beyond the standard marital asset split. She nodded and moved on. There was a phone call from Patrick's mother who asked Nicole to please not do this, to please think about what she was doing to the family, to please consider giving Patrick a chance to explain. Nicole listened to the whole message. She sat with it. She thought about Patrick's mother, who had been kind to her, who had fed her at holidays and meant it, and she felt sorry that this woman's son had made choices that had brought them all here. But she did not call back. She was not going backward. Not for Patrick's sake, not for the family's sake, not for any reason that required her to minimize what had happened. She had given this marriage everything she had. She had shrunk herself and waited and trusted. She was not going to do one more thing on behalf of a marriage that had been alive for over a year. She was going forward. And forward, for the first time in a long time, actually looked like somewhere worth going. The apartment Nicole found was on the third floor of a building with a courtyard and high ceilings and more natural light than she had known what to do with at first. It was smaller than the house. Everything fit because she had only brought what actually belonged to her, not in a legal sense, but in the true sense. The things she had chosen before the marriage, the things she had held onto through it, the things that had always been unambiguously hers. She bought a new desk. She set it up in front of the window where the light was best. She got her portfolio drive from her bag and plugged it in and opened files she had not opened in 3 years. Her work was good. Looking at it now, with fresh distance, she could see that clearly. She had been talented before she set it aside, and the skill had not left, it had been waiting. The way skills do when you have built them into yourself deeply enough. They go quiet, but they do not disappear. Her first new client was a woman named Dr. Anita Price, a physician who had bought a townhouse and wanted it redesigned with a focus on calm and recovery. She worked long hours, and her home needed to feel like an actual rest. Nicole met her at the townhouse on a Tuesday morning and they walked through each room together. Dr. Price talked about how she felt in different spaces and what she needed those spaces to do for her. Nicole listened and took notes, and her mind was already moving: colors, materials, flow, light. She delivered the initial concept 3 days later. Dr. Price looked at it and said, "This is exactly what I meant even though I could not have described it." That sentence was the first truly good thing Nicole had felt in months. Not relief, good. The particular good feeling of doing something well at the exact level of your ability. She took 2 more projects within the following 2 weeks. Small ones, local clients, a couple who wanted their dining room transformed for hosting, a small business owner who needed a reception area that felt trustworthy and welcoming. Nicole worked on them with full attention. She put in late nights not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because the work was hers, and it felt like hers, and the evenings spent drawing concepts and sourcing materials were evenings spent in her own company, rather than in the performance of someone else's version of her life. Bria came over most Thursdays. They ordered food and sat on Nicole's new sofa and talked about everything. Bria gave her updates on the legal process, which was progressing steadily. She also made Nicole laugh more than she had and longer than she could measure. Bria had a sharp, irreverent humor that operated best in the presence of absurdity, and the situation, the resort, the receipts, Tara's startup, the whole elaborate architecture of Patrick's plan, had a quality of absurdity that Bria could locate and name precisely. He printed out the emails, Bria said one Thursday, shaking her head. He printed them and filed them. He filed evidence of his own crime, alphabetically probably. Nicole laughed until she had to put her plate down. There were harder evenings too. Evenings when the apartment was very quiet and she was between projects and her mind went to the years she had given. Not with anger, she had moved through the sharpest anger already, but with something closer to mourning. She had believed in that marriage. She had believed Patrick was someone he had not actually been, and that belief had cost her years and energy and the best part of her career momentum. That was a real loss. She did not pretend it was not. But she had learned something in the months since she found the receipt. Loss and forward motion are not opposites. You can carry something and still move. You can acknowledge what was taken without becoming someone who has been defeated by it. She started running in the mornings. She had not run consistently since before the marriage. She did it slowly at first, 20 minutes, then 30, then 45. The neighborhood was good for it, flat streets, a park nearby where the light in the mornings was clear and clean. She ran and her mind settled, and the day started on a foundation that was purely her own. She also called her mother. Her mother, who lived 3 hours away and had always trusted Nicole's instincts more than Nicole trusted them herself, listened to everything. When Nicole finished, her mother was quiet for a moment and then said, "I wondered sometimes. I didn't want to say." Nicole said she understood that. "What are you going to do now?" her mother asked. "I'm already doing it," Nicole said. Her mother said, "Good." She said it the way she always said things she meant. The design business was growing faster than Nicole had expected. Word traveled. It always did in the kind of city where people talk to each other. Dr. Price mentioned her to a colleague. The couple with the dining room told their friends. By the end of her second month of working full-time again, she had more inquiries than she had immediately available time for, and she was in the good position of choosing carefully. She updated her portfolio website. She took new photographs of her recent work. She wrote a short description of her practice that she had been putting off because writing about herself always felt awkward, but this time it came easily. She knew what she was now. She was not trying to fit herself into a shape that worked for someone else. She was describing exactly what was actually there. She hit publish on the website at 10:30 on a Thursday night and felt something she had not felt in years. She felt like herself. The inquiry came through her website contact form, which still surprised her slightly every time it happened, that she had built something people could find and be moved by enough to reach out. The message was from a man named Cole Bernard, who wrote that he was opening a restaurant in 3 months and needed someone who could create a space that felt like a place people would want to come back to. Not just for the food, but for the way the space felt. He had seen her work on Dr. Price's townhouse through a mutual connection. He asked if she had availability. She wrote back the same day. He responded within an hour. They arranged to meet at the restaurant space that Friday. The space was a former bookshop on a corner lot, 2 floors, with large windows that she immediately liked. Cole Bernard was already there when she arrived. He was leaning against the front window looking at something on his phone, and he looked up when she came around the corner. He was tall, with the kind of steady, grounded presence that some people have where you feel it before you have really registered what they look like. He put his phone in his pocket before she reached the door. "Nicole," he said, and his handshake was firm without being a performance about it. They walked the space together. He talked about what he wanted, not in vague, unhelpful ways, but specifically. He wanted the ground floor to feel open enough for noise and energy without being loud. He wanted the second floor to feel more private, for the kind of dinner where people needed to talk. He cared about lighting, about the way surfaces aged, about whether the space would still look good in 5 years. Nicole asked him questions and took notes and took photographs of the bones of the building, the brick walls, the wide wooden floor, the window heights. She looked at the way light moved through the space at this hour. She thought about the second floor and what it could become. "What made you want to do a restaurant?" she asked, And the question was genuine. She was curious about what drove people toward the things they built. He thought about it for a moment before he answered. She liked that he thought about it. I grew up in a house where the kitchen was the center of everything, he said. Every important conversation happened around food. I want to build a place where that can happen for other people. It was a simple answer, and a real one. They talked for 2 hours. By the end, she had enough to start the concept. She told him her timeline and her rate. He agreed without negotiating in a way that felt like confidence rather than carelessness. He trusted what she had said her work was worth. That was not always the case with clients. She went home and worked on the concept for 3 days. She came back with a presentation that laid out the full vision, the materials, the color palette, the furniture approach, the way the lighting would shift between lunch service and evening. She had been excited about it in that particular way that happened when a project matched exactly with your abilities. He sat across from her at a borrowed table in the empty restaurant and looked through everything slowly. She watched him look. He turned each page with care. When he reached the end, he looked up at her. "This is more than I asked for," he said, "and it's better." She smiled. "That's generally the goal." They shook hands. He said he would have the deposit to her by end of business. She was almost at the door when he said, "Can I ask you something?" She turned. "Are you okay? You have this way of holding yourself like you're carrying something and it's okay, but you're very aware of it." She was surprised. She stood in the doorway for a moment and thought about it. "I'm in the middle of a divorce," she said. It was the first time she had said it to someone who was not directly involved in it. He nodded. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," she said. "I'm not," and she meant it. He smiled at that, not the kind of smile that was trying to make her feel better, but the kind that recognized something real and gave it space. "I'll get that deposit over," he said. She went home. She did not think about Cole romantically at first. She was not looking for that, and she was not ready for it, and she knew herself well enough to know that rebuilding herself was work that needed space. But she found herself thinking about the conversation in the doorway. The way he had said something true without pressing it. The way she had told him something she had not told anyone outside of her close circle, and it had felt easy. Over the following weeks they were in regular contact about the restaurant. He was a good collaborator, he had opinions, but he held them loosely enough to be genuinely changed by a good argument. He asked for her reasoning and listened to it. He made her laugh more than once during working conversations, always with something dry and specific to the moment rather than a performance of humor. She found herself looking forward to the site visits. One afternoon, after a long session reviewing material samples on the second floor, he offered to get coffee from the place next door. They sat in the empty restaurant with paper cups of coffee and talked about nothing related to the project for almost an hour. He had traveled a lot, worked in kitchens in different cities before he decided to open his own. He asked about her work and listened in the way that meant he was actually interested. He had a younger sister who talked too fast and made him laugh. She drove home afterward and sat in her parking spot for a few minutes before going up. She was not ready. She was still in the middle of her divorce, still putting herself together, still becoming the clearer version of herself she had been working toward. She knew all of this. But she also knew that something about Cole Bernard was real, in a way she had been missing for a long time. She got out of the car and went upstairs. She made tea and opened her laptop and worked until late. It was a good evening. The settlement meeting lasted 4 hours. Nicole sat across the conference table from Patrick and his attorney, and she did not look at Patrick more than she had to. She looked at Mr. Okafor, who moved through the documents with the measured confidence of a man who knew exactly where he was standing. Patrick's attorney had been aggressive in earlier communications, but in the room, facing the financial documentation and the timeline that Mr. Okafor had built into a clear, careful record, the aggression had shrunk to something more careful. Patrick looked older than she remembered. She noticed it in the way she had noticed everything in recent months clearly, without the story she used to tell herself over the top of it. He was not a monster. He was a man who had made choices, and those choices had a price, and now it was time to pay it. She felt no satisfaction looking at him, just a kind of finality, like a door closing on a house you have already moved out of. The settlement gave Nicole the investment property outright. It gave her a financial sum that reflected the marital funds that had been diverted without her consent. It gave her full legal separation from every joint financial instrument. Patrick kept the family home, which was the right outcome. She did not want to go back to that house, did not want to be in the rooms where the performance of normalcy had played out. She was keeping what was real and leaving what was theater. Patrick signed the final papers without looking at her. His attorney said something afterward about hoping both parties could move forward in a healthy way. Nicole said nothing. Mr. Acaffer thanked everyone for their time. They walked out of the conference room ahead of Patrick and his attorney, and Nicole did not look back. In the elevator, Mr. Acaffer said, "You did very well." She said, "So did you." Outside, she stood on the sidewalk in the clear afternoon air and felt the relief move through her slowly, like something that has been held back for a long time and is finally, carefully let go. Not joy exactly, not triumph, something quieter and deeper, the specific piece of a thing resolved, of a chapter fully, properly closed. She called Bria from the parking lot. Bria made a sound that was equal parts relief and celebration and then said, "Dinner, tonight. You are not sitting alone with this." Nicole said yes. The other thing happened 3 weeks later. Mr. Acaffer called her on a Tuesday afternoon to let her know that some of the financial documents that had come out during the discovery process had been seen by people beyond the two attorneys and the court. Patrick's employer had been made aware of certain patterns, the use of company resources, the time during work hours spent on Clarity Venture Co. activities, certain company expense reports that had been filed in connection with trips that were clearly not entirely professional. The employer launched an internal review. Patrick lost his job at the end of the following week. Nicole heard this from Bria, who had heard it from the paralegal network that knew everything about everything. She sat with the information for a moment. She had not set out to cause that particular outcome. The divorce filing had been about protecting herself. The documents had come out because they were relevant to her case. The rest had been the natural consequence of a man who had built a structure of deception that, once exposed, kept unraveling in every direction. She did not feel happy about it, but she did not feel sorry about it either. Tara's situation was more complicated. Clarity Venture Co. had been partially funded by money that the court had determined was not Patrick's to give. That created legal questions for the business that Tara would have to work through with her own counsel. Nicole had no role in what happened next for Tara. She did not want one. That part of the world was fully behind her. She was not going to look at it again. She put the phone down and made tea, and stood at her kitchen window looking at the courtyard below. She thought about what Patrick had actually believed when he made his plan. She thought he had believed she would not look, that she was too trusting, too wrapped up in being a good wife, too invested in the story of their life together to see through it. He had used that trust as cover for everything he was doing. He had bet on her blindness. He had been wrong. That was not something she needed to celebrate. It was just a fact. She had been trusting, yes, but she had not been powerless. And the moment she chose to see clearly, she had seen everything. She was also thinking, standing at her window, about what it meant to start over at 34. It was not the tragedy it had seemed in those first days after she found the receipt. Starting over meant starting clean. It meant building something that was fully chosen, not inherited, not adjusted, not shaped around someone else's needs. She had already been doing it. The apartment, the work, the mornings running in the park, the growing business. The life that was emerging slowly, in the shape of what she actually wanted. She thought about Cole. The restaurant was 3 weeks from opening. The space had come together beautifully. She had visited 4 days ago to walk through with the lighting team, and the effect was everything she had designed it to be: the ground floor alive and open, the second floor quiet and close, the materials settling into something that felt like it had always been there. Cole had stood in the middle of the ground floor and turned slowly and then looked at her with a kind of gratitude that had nothing performative in it. "You built exactly what I asked for," he said. "You asked for exactly the right thing," she said. They had stood there for a moment, and she had felt something she did not want to rush, but also did not want to ignore. She was not healed all the way. She did not think healed all the way was the accurate description of what she was working toward. She was herself again, fully, clearly, without apology. That was enough. That was more than enough. She finished her tea. She opened her laptop. She had 3 new inquiries from the weekend. She wrote back to all of them. The magazine feature ran on a Thursday. It was a regional publication that covered design, architecture, food, and culture in the city and surrounding areas. A magazine Nicole had read for years, had once submitted work to early in her career before she set that career aside. The feature was 2 pages, with photographs of 3 of her recent projects: Dr. Price's townhouse, a home office she had redesigned for a tech entrepreneur, and Cole's restaurant, which had opened 2 weeks ago to a waiting list that stretched 3 months out. Her mother called within an hour of the issue going online. She said, "Look at you." She said it twice. Bria texted an image of the magazine cover, with every celebration emoji available. Nicole sat at her desk, in her apartment with the high ceilings and the good light, and she looked at the photographs of her own work in print, and she felt the specific satisfaction that does not require anyone else's validation. The kind that comes from seeing clearly that you did the thing, and that the thing is good, and that the path that led here was yours. Cole's restaurant had been everything she had designed it to be on opening night. She had gone not as the designer, or not only as the designer. Cole had asked her to come as a guest, to sit at a table and eat the food and let the space do what it was supposed to do. She had arrived to find the restaurant full and warm with voices, the lighting landing exactly where she had wanted it, the second floor quiet and intimate above the energy of the ground floor. A hostess she did not recognize showed her to a corner table and told her Mr. Bernard had reserved it. He came out of the kitchen 40 minutes into service to check on the room, which was what he said he was doing, though he came directly to her table, which suggested the room was not the only thing he was checking on. He sat across from her for 10 minutes while the kitchen ran itself, and they talked about the restaurant and the opening, and then about things that had nothing to do with work, the way they had been doing lately with increasing ease. When he got up to go back to the kitchen, he said, "When this madness settles, maybe next week, I want to take you to dinner. Not here. Somewhere neither of us has anything to do with." She looked at him. He was direct, she had learned, without being pushy. He asked for what he wanted and then gave her space to answer. "Next week works," she said. He smiled and went back to the kitchen. She had sat there for another hour, eating the food, watching the space she had designed fill up with people who seemed to want to be there, and she had felt something that was hard to name exactly. Fullness, maybe. The sense of a life that was actual, not a performance, not a careful management of someone else's comfort, not a waiting. Just a real life, with real work and real people and real feeling. She and Cole had dinner the following Wednesday at a small Italian place in the north part of the city that he had chosen because the owner was an old friend, and the pasta was made fresh each morning. They sat for 3 hours. They talked about everything. He told her about the restaurants he had worked in and what he had learned in each of them. She told him about her career, the early part, the years she had set it aside, the coming back. He listened to all of it without flinching and without offering easy comfort. He said things that were true rather than things that were soothing. At the end of the evening, he walked her to her car. He said he had a good time. She said she had too. "I know you are still finding your ground," he said. "I'm not in any rush." She looked at him and thought about how different that sentence was from every conversation she had not had with Patrick. Every time she had tried to talk about where they were going, and he had redirected or deflected or simply not been present enough to respond. Cole was saying exactly where he was and giving her exactly what she needed. No pressure and no pretending. "I appreciate that," she said. "I'm getting there." "I can tell," he said. And the way he said it, not as flattery but as an observation, made her believe him. She drove home through the city lights. She thought about the morning she had found the hotel receipt. She thought about the kitchen table, the cold coffee, the silence of the house. She thought about Patrick ironing his shirt the night before he left, about kissing him at the door, about all the things she had not yet known. She thought about who she had been that morning, not a weak person, not a foolish one, a trusting person, a woman who had believed in what she had built. The difference between that morning and tonight was not that she had stopped trusting. She still trusted. She trusted Bria. She trusted Mr. Acaffer. She trusted her own instincts now in a way she had learned to suppress. The difference was that she trusted from a clear eye now. She knew the difference between a person who deserved it and a pattern that was asking her to ignore herself. She parked outside her building. She sat for a moment. 6 months ago she had been in this same car, in a different parking spot, having just come from Mr. Acaffer's office with a retainer receipt and a plan. 6 months. It felt both shorter and longer than that. The way significant time always does, compressed when you try to hold all of it, and enormous when you step into any single moment of it. She got out of the car and went upstairs. Her apartment was lit and clean. Her desk had a project on it, a new inquiry, a loft space that the client wanted to transform into a genuine home. She had started sketching ideas the day before. She would work on it tomorrow. On the kitchen counter there was a note she had written to herself weeks ago, when she was still in the early raw part of rebuilding. "You are not starting over. You are starting from what is real." She had kept it there because it was true and because she had needed to read it regularly. She did not need to read it as much anymore, but she left it there anyway. She made tea. She stood at the window looking at the courtyard below, the same courtyard she had looked at from the guest room at Bria's, where the pigeons argued every morning. From up here at night it was quiet. The lights were on in windows across the way, other lives doing what lives do. She thought about Cole. She thought about the restaurant and the magazine and the growing list of clients and the mornings running in the park and Bria on Thursdays and her mother's voice on the phone saying, "Look at you." She thought, yes, look at me. She did not say it out loud. She did not need to. She just stood there with her tea in her life, which was fully and completely hers, and she let herself feel how good that was. Simply, quietly, without explaining it to anyone. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was, she thought, exactly enough. And the difference between enough and more than enough was something she had learned to stop worrying about. The courtyard was quiet, the city moved around her, the night settled in. Nicole stood at her window and breathed, and it was good.